John Milor, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. Retired military personnel, air defense sector. Thank you for reaching out to my show. It's been very, very hard for me to get guests, or actually, even well, not get guests, but get shows on the air the past couple months with everything I've been through, changing jobs and everything. Got a job interview at Staples this Friday. Hope that goes well before I go to Illinois to see that eclipse. But thank you for reaching out. So much trouble getting shows on with everything I've been through. Don't know what my schedule's going to be. Hopefully that'll change once I can get my work schedule intact. But glad you're able to reach out to me to come on. So why don't you explain who you are from a primary source perspective, what you experienced that caused you to do the stuff that you do, and then we'll get into some very interesting subjects, tailing to the Bible, Christian Ufology, the strange God of Antichrist, and all that other stuff that you sent me to. Gonna have to ask you to do it on the fly, though, some of the material, because we're only got an hour, and the first 40 minutes will be pay-per-view. So knock yourself out. You got to the floor.
Okay, thank you. So my story dates back to, I could start all as early as 5 years old, that I was at my great-grandmother's house on one evening when there was a big family gathering there. So I think it was like around Christmas time or something. And my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather, they were into ministry. My grandfather was an evangelist for like over 30 years. They traveled all over the United States, big tent revivals and stuff during the Great Depression. So their lives were devoted to, Jesus and the gospel, and they were very involved in church, and that was like the center of their life. And so if you knew anything about my great grandmother, you'd know that about her. Very active in church in the Bible Belt, Kentucky, when she was a kid. One night when we were there, and I was 5 years old, this was back in 1975, she's reading a newspaper, and she makes an announcement to the family that when she was a little girl, she saw a UFO. She and her sister saw it. And so they described this event where they saw a UFO on the plains of Kentucky, and it dates back to before they ever even knew what an automobile looked like. They'd never seen a motorized contraption like a vehicle. So they lived way out in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky. And when they saw this, it was like right around the turn of the century. So it was over 100 years ago. And everybody in the room was silent. And, being a 5-year-old, I'm like looking around at everybody's expressions. And I'm like, okay, whatever grandma's talking about, that's a big deal. Because everybody's talking and they're just like listening. And when grandma finished telling her story about this thing, you even saw the occupant in this transparent bubble on top as it flew by. It was that close. It turned and looked at him as he flew by. Her and her sister saw it, and they ran back and told their mom, and their mom told them never tell anybody that story ever again. I don't know what the deal was with that. I guess she didn't want anybody to make fun of them or be humiliated or anything like that, and she swore them to secrecy. So her sister died shortly after that, so she kept this to herself for many, many years. But she read this article in the newspaper about this wild goose chase between a police car and a UFO. And she's reading this article out loud. She says, now listen to this. And she reads this article. And then when she finishes reading the article, and she said, when I was a little girl, I saw a UFO. And I don't care what people think. Those things are real. So my young mind, I'm hitting my mom up with all these questions, well, what is this? What is a UFO? What's all that? And well, we watched Star Trek. So my mom just basically said, well, what you see in Star Trek, it's probably more real than what people think. And so I was raised, believing there's this other kind of reality over here with ETs and stuff. And then there's the Christian faith. And I just kind of believed that they were both real. And I never really reconciled or thought to reconcile any discrepancies or differences between the two. Just figured they're both real somehow. My grandmother did too. She believed that they were both real, but she never thought of anything being contradictory. Now, Then later, and when I was in the Army at 21 years old, I witnessed this glowing ball of light in the jungle of Panama. Uh, this was during the Panamanian conflict, and I was in the active duty Army at the time on guard duty behind Fort Sherman in Panama. And this glowing ball of light it would flash on and off. It was about the size of a soccer ball. And it came out of the jungle and approached our position where I was at, me and my team leader. And when it reached our position, it stopped. And it just continued to flash on and off. And I had night vision goggles. I'm looking through there. I'm not seeing it at all. I can't hear it. I can't see it. It's like not there. But about every 30 seconds, it flashed. And it was as bright as a camera flash and the size of a soccer ball, like pure electricity. So I proceeded to have a conversation with it. Of course, my team leader, when I woke him up, he was freaking out and cussing me out and yelling at me. But this was too important for me to ignore. And so I introduced myself to it. And I said, we come in peace. And to make that claim, I actually had to take my M60 off. I was the M60 gunner. But it wouldn't really make much sense to say I come in peace when I'm wearing an M60 with 750 rounds of ammo. But yeah, I disarmed myself, and my team leader was coming unglued, but I'm like, no, I'm going to communicate. And if this thing wanted to kill us, it probably could have done it already. It's got a lot of electricity coming off of it, and it's not acting like ball lightning. It's not acting like swamp gas. Certainly doesn't look like either of those either. Ball lightning, sort of, maybe, but this thing was huge, you know. Um, Anyways, when I was talking to it, it did something weird to my head. Like I could feel its presence. I knew where it was when it wasn't flashing on, and I felt it moving toward me after I asked for it to reveal itself. And that kind of freaked me out because I literally felt it moving. Um, so it like was transmitting its location to me somehow. And I remember grabbing the night vision goggles and looking through them. And I was telling the team leader that was with me, I feel it moving. I feel it moving. And I was tracking and I turned around. I did a complete 180. I felt it fly right over my head. And I said, the next time it's going to flash right there. And when I said the word there and pointed, it flashed like it was on cue, exactly where I pointed. So somehow this thing communicated with me by letting me know that, you know, it was alive, and it let me know exactly where it was located. So it could proceeded to flash on and off as it went around our position. It did a complete 360 around our position, flashing on and off as it went, like almost like a probe or something, you know, like getting a perspective of the entire position from every angle. And then it went down deeper into the jungle to the other two positions down there, and it did a perimeter, went around their perimeters as well, and then went back off into the jungle. So I was all fired up about this, but nobody else wanted to talk about it. In fact, I kind of got labeled a weirdo, and I was all into the paranormal and stuff at that time because of it goes back to like my grandmother and my sister, and she was into the paranormal and stuff. So I really just latched onto that and really had this deep interest in paranormal and spiritual, unexplainable things, and got kind of a reputation for it in the Army. People used to pick on me all the time and make fun of me and whatnot. And of course, this didn't help. And they were teasing me and mocking me, saying that I summoned it. You know, I was like, "Are you kidding me? I mean, you guys saw it too." Uh, but the more I brought it up, and the more I tried to, you know, tell them that this was an amazing thing that happened, the more they'd make fun of me. So I just really didn't talk about it with them. Of course, then I got out of the Army and I went through some changes in my life, and I had an encounter myself with God. I had a dream one night where Jesus came to me in a dream, but he was invisible. I couldn't see him. I, I just knew that there was a presence with me, and he was showing me all of these different things going on, and basically revealing to me if I didn't change what I was doing and the way I was living, I was going to either end up in jail or dead. It was a sobering dream, but part of the dream was just like really relieving, like he lifted a weight off of me and let me know here's how you could be living right now. If you just stop doing these things, you would feel a lot better. And it's something that no one could have ever convinced me. But I woke up from this dream. This was when I was 21 years old. And I verbally asked the question out loud, who was that invisible person? Um, just thinking to myself, you know, and then actual audible name, Jesus, spoke in my ear, like the whiskers are touching my ear, Jesus. I wasn't expecting an answer. That was profoundly shocking to actually have my question answered when I'm alone in my bedroom. And then I felt his presence right there. And this overwhelming love just dropped on me like a ton of bricks. And I'd never felt like that before. And so everything in my life changed at that point. I believed in God. For me, it's almost not really even faith because I feel like I don't even have the option to say I don't believe. It was that profound. Um, like the Apostle Paul when he saw Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and then here he went from persecuting Christians and stoning them to death to suddenly becoming a Christian and one of the main advocates and primary author of the New Testament. So radical change, right? Um, but some things didn't trickle off. I still had an interest in paranormal things, and I had an encyclopedia of paranormal phenomena in my head. I had all these books and stuff, and um, so many different paranormal stories and stuff in my life up until that point. Now I was on a mission to reconcile these two realities, you know, because I found out, if you believe that ETs are real, then it automatically dovetails into supporting evolution. And then there's all these theories floating around, like, humanity was seeded here on Earth by ETs. And um, that's just a natural conclusion that 90% of, 90 plus percent of ancient astronaut theory, they all believe that, a version of that. Um, anyways, I started reading the Bible and stuff right then and there. Genesis chapter 6, I barely started. And I'm reading about these angels mating with humans and having giants. And then I started thinking, wait a second, I remember the story of David and Goliath. And I never thought to ask as a kid, where does giant come from? What's that all about? But this was like literally talking about genetic differences that created these mutant hybrids that were freaks of nature. And this was in the Bible. And I'm like, this is really paranormal. Um, so I started reading the Bible, and the Bible reads to me like Star Wars. And I'm seeing all of these things just jumping out at me, and I'm just taking notes. And so that's kind of what started me on this whole quest. And back in 2000 is when I published Aliens in the Bible. And that was my first book. And I cover this whole gambit of paranormal things, astral projection, past life regression, reincarnation, hypnosis, tarot cards, but the UFO thing was my main focus. It's the title, Aliens in the Bible. Um, and then I kept researching that over the years and refining different theories and discovering more and more information in the Bible as I went. So that's pretty much my origin story on how a lot of this came about.
All right. And the idea, Christians and ufology and such, some would say they don't mix. But then again, that all changed when the Vatican said that a belief in extraterrestrials does not contradict a belief in God. I believe that was the first ever thing they ever said on the pilot episode of Ancient Aliens of all back in 2009. And I guess you of all people would have no choice but to agree with that. Then again, there are those who say that to believe that that it would totally flies in the face of what Christians are supposed to stand for, that humans are God's creation and all that. There is no other race other than humans. But is that Christian dogma that was created by factions that want to suppress the truth, in your opinion?
I think it's created by a lot of misconceptions and a lot of people who don't do analytical thinking about what they're reading, and they don't ask any questions. They just accept things and they don't look at it from other perspectives. They don't consider other possibilities. They just say, no, it says this black and white. This is what I'm going to believe. There can't be any other explanation done. But really, it has to do with interpretation. It's all about interpretation. Um, for somebody to be emphatic about the Bible does not support extraterrestrial life. When you read all throughout, there's words like creatures, stars, and angels. Three terms referring to intelligent life that are not human. They're advanced intelligent life. Creatures just kind of like spans the gambit. You know, some creatures are like your animals, right? Beasts of the field, but creatures has also been used to refer to angelic beings also. But angels in particular are very specific and very detailed. And these are beings that some of them are very powerful and they're in God's presence. And, you know, so the Bible specifically tells you there are intelligent life and they're even more powerful than humanity and they've been around longer. They predate us. But they'll get into arguments with you. Some people will get into arguments with you about like, no, they don't. They were created in 6 days. And like, wait, okay, how many angels were there? Innumerable. You can't even count them. There's so many. And then I'll say, okay, Revelation 12, 7, 8 says that the dragon dragged a third of the stars from the sky. So you can kind of speculate there that that probably refers to the angels that he managed to deceive in his rebellion against God, right? Satan, he rebelled against God. And they're like, yeah, they'll agree with that and say, okay, so he managed to deceive 1/3 of an innumerable amount of life of these angelic beings in what, a couple days? How's that? I mean, deception is extremely well crafted, well orchestrated, very difficult thing to do, especially when you're talking about incredibly intelligent beings that have been in God's presence. If you're deceiving them, you got your work cut out for you. And yet he managed to deceive 1/3 of them, and there's an innumerable. That had to happen before humanity. So, well, then they get into this argument about, well, that's in heaven, and then like they don't understand what heaven is, even though the Bible specifically defines it in Genesis 14, 114 as the abode of the sun and the stars. The word Shemi literally refers to outer space. So how can you say that angels who dwell in the heavens, which is outer space, according to the Bible, that is somewhere different? And they'll say, no, it's not in this dimension. Like, well, okay, we already know from quantum physics, this reality is a lot more mysterious than we think. Just because you can't see something, doesn't mean it isn't there. That there are levels to this reality, that atomic structure. I mean, right now, quantum physics speculates, or, they've actually done mathematics on it, in theory, which is the next version of string theory, that there are 11 dimensions. And it's because of mathematically they can prove it. They've won a Nobel Prize for proving that. So we understand now that the universe is a lot more complicated and a lot more vast than we could ever imagine. And the nature of the universe is coming more into a clear standard of focus with today's science. We can understand what heaven is, that it is part of our known reality. Just because we can't see the multiple layers of dimensions that are around us doesn't mean they aren't there. And that they are, part of this reality. They are composed of atomic structure. Even your spirit in your body is composed of an atomic structure. So this is kind of where a lot of my science reasoning and like study about ghosts and stuff comes into this, because you see these ghosts, how they can manipulate radio waves and speak through ghost boxes and mess with electricity and stuff. They would not be able to do that if there was not some kind of matter that was there manipulating those things. They have a kind of physical body, but it is of a different type of matter. It's like an exotic matter, I'll call it. And you can't physically see it unless they really consolidate themselves, but it has to do with the frequency of which the spirit is resonating, whether they become solid and are able to move things around, or they, become less solid, but they're still a type of matter. And the universe itself, it's a multidimensional construct. It's just a multiverse that we live in. And the Bible actually describes these things. The Bible describes Earth itself as a multidimensional construct. Hell is inside the earth, in the heart of the earth. The Bible talks about this. But science is like, wait, inside the earth is lava. You get this core in here, right? We have scientific measurements and stuff that tell us these things. And yet, the Bible describes this an entire civilization that is inside the earth. My theory is that the earth is like an onion, and it has all these lithospheres that hell, the lower dimensions of earth that are really unpleasant, that earth is a smaller planet. We're like in a middle earth, literally like J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth, that he talked about. We're in the middle. There is a higher level dimension. The Bible refers to it, talks about the sky. If you look up in Strong's Enhanced Lexicon, the word for heaven, it gives you three definitions. The sky immediately surrounding the earth, that there's a whole civilization that's there. Then there's outer space, which is the most frequently used reference, and it's a plural word, shamayim in Hebrew. It refers to the abode of the sun and the moon and the stars. That's the most frequently used word referring to heaven. And then there's the realm where God's throne is, and it is literally described as a physical planet because it has a city, it has a river, it has trees, it has mountains, it has a sky, there's atmospheric phenomenon that goes on there. It is a planet, but it's a glorified planet, and it's where God has his capital city and his throne. And in three different places in the Bible, it refers to a physical direction, north. So it's in the northern quadrant of the universe. We even know where it's at. The Bible tells us there's a glorified planet out there where God has his throne. And it speaks of beings that go there, like they travel there to worship God at his throne. So it's these beings that are in the cosmos, God isn't a mystery to them. Most of them, they know him, they know who he is, and they can actually travel to his planet for doing things and commerce and everything. So really, Star Wars is actually a lot closer to reality than people think. The only difference would be there's a lot of life out there, but they know who God is. He's not a mystery, or he's not some unknown, unsolvable. He is mysterious. No one can ever really truly know him in the sense of knowing everything about him, because there's a part of him that's outside of all time and space altogether. And that's where God is different from all of his creation. God is the creator. He created the heavens and the earth, which means everything. Like, if there's an entity that exists that is alive, it's not capable of escaping outside of time space altogether. Even if it can travel forward or backward in time, it can't escape time itself. It can't. Only God can do that. And Jesus himself, as he described himself, was created by the Father in this dimension, in the womb of Mary. But he's a time traveler, because once he created himself a physical body, and he died and resurrected from the cross, and he went back to his place in heaven, he was able to travel through time inside his creation at that point in time. Then he went back to the beginning, before anything ever existed, and he started creating all life in the universe because he's the firstborn of all creation, according to John. So, from our linear mind, we can't even wrap our heads around what that means. To be the firstborn of all creation, yet he's born in the middle of linear time for our perspective, but for him, that was the beginning. When Jesus came into this reality, he was the firstborn, and he traveled back in time, created all the life, created the angels. Billions of years later, created Adam and Eve, through who he knew that he was going to become incarnated in. And the Bible actually describes Jesus all throughout the Old Testament having a physical body and whatnot. And the reason I come up with all of that is because Jesus literally said, nobody has seen the Father except for him. Yet you have people in the Bible who saw God. Well, that was Jesus that they were seeing in the Old Testament before he was born. Because Jesus was a time traveler. He could go back. He could do anything. He's God. It's through him that all creation was made. But a lot of these people who do the ancient astronaut shows and stuff, they don't get any of that. They don't understand the Trinity, and they want to demote God to this race of ETs that created humanity or seeded life. But then you still have the original question, well, what about the universe? And most of them will probably say something like, well, that's a Big Bang or whatever. They don't really have an answer for that. They just want to take God out of it. And I'm like, no, God is the ultimate mystery behind everything. And the Bible actually lays the record straight and tells us these things. There's a lot of interesting things in the Bible that make the Bible actually more like a Star Wars type book with what it describes. I mean, everything that we have going on here actually predates humanity. There used to be an angelic civilization that once existed on Earth, for example. So, from a Christian perspective, you can actually have a valid, justifiable biblical reason to explain advanced technology that archaeologists find, because the Bible literally states there was an advanced civilization here on Earth before humanity. So that's the meat of it. Generally, is that a lot of Christians will say that there's no compatibility here because they're looking at some of these surface level things like evolution and stuff like that. But or they'll conclude that it's all a demonic hoax or something like that, and that's part of the story. There are some fallen angels. The Bible says that some of the angels are fallen, but then there's some that are good. And a lot of this ends up, when you really start digging into it, you start ending up researching end times prophecies and stuff like that because it's related. It directly relates, and it shows you things that are coming up in the future that directly involve this.
Okay, and the idea that the Bible, even though it's called the greatest story is ever told, has stories that are based on something that actually happened. Probably the best person in ancient astronaut theory to be a proponent of that was Zecharia Sitchin, and several sources, including the Akashic Records, have had, this isn't me talking, this is the Akashic Records talking, have said that Zecharia Sitchin's first 3 books are extremely accurate in terms of the events, even though his timelines are a little off. Now, in terms of his first book, The 12th Planet, the implications behind that is extremely enormous. Yeah, there is a Nibiru. Yeah, there is an Anunnaki from Nibiru. Yeah, there is the Anunnaki came to Earth to genetically engineer humanity. And can you resonate with that idea that Sitchin was accurate and his interpretation of the Bible is based on the actual events that he was able to deduce after 50 years of scholarly work translating ancient texts?
Okay, so Anunnaki is the Sumerian term that refers to the sons of God, also known as the B'nai Elohim in Hebrew, the Watchers. which the Book of Enoch documents in detail. So Zechariah likes to borrow from the Bible where it suits, where it fits the narrative of the Sumerians. But the Sumerians actually, they had their own theology and their idea of who the good guy was and who the bad guy was. Give you an example of that. The Epic of Gilgamesh is actually Nimrod in Genesis 11. Same story. A lot of the details are same. You can cross-reference them back and forth. And the Sumerian actually gives you a little bit more information. Gilgamesh's mother, for example, was, one of these, descended from one of these Anunnaki. So she is from a descendant of these angels that decided to turn against their former estate, as the Bible talks about in the Book of Enoch. And, but the thing from the Sumerian context, though, Nimrod, or what's his name, Nimrod is who is Gilgamesh, is the hero of that story in the Sumerian story. He's the hero. He builds a tower to defy the God who brought the flood. The Bible use of the word Nimrod to describe his name, it actually means rebel, like one who is rebelling against God. So you can see here how you got the story, same context, a lot of things can cross-reference, but the fundamental aspect of who the good guys are and who the bad guys are is flip-flopped. So that's where I would very much disagree with Zechariah's conclusions. A lot of the information is accurate. A lot of the information, I'm not going to argue with it. Yes, the Bible actually talks about these beings that came here and intermingled with man, shared a lot of technology. They had their different agendas. They were competing with each other and whatnot. And you see these same legends played out, like among the Greek pantheon and the Egyptian pantheon. They borrowed these legends and they come down from ancient times. And they all have a lot of similarities in it. The same story, though. It's the same story of these beings, that they were angelic beings. But they came here and they ended up mating with humans and crossing with us. And it also talks about how they manipulated our DNA. This is where these giants came from. The word Nephilim means fallen. These are the giants. So not all of them were giants, because the word giant is very close in the Greek. And that's why they said that it translates as giant, like dating back to King James. But they also it says these were men of renown. So they were extremely powerful. They were famous. Most likely they had supernatural abilities, just like the Greek mythologies and the Norse mythologies and the Indian Vedas. They all talk about the same thing. These otherworldly beings came here, but what happened? It created a mess. These beings were horribly evil. They were cannibals, the bulk of them. They were running around eating people. They were killing and warring against each other. So Zechariah talks about some of that, but the fundamental aspect of, okay, the ones who did this, who came here and crossed with us, they're bad. They're disobeying God. Not all of them did that. Some of them didn't. Like Michael, for example, and Uriel and Raphael, I think that they did not sin, that they were among the watchers, the sons of God. So, the Bible mentions them again in the book of Job, chapter 1, where you see this divine council with God at his throne. And the sons of God come before him to report there. Satan is among them, and he's accusing. The word Satan actually means accuser. So this is one of these that's an accuser. And it's the same story, but they're rebelling against God. And this is where the Hebrew Bible distinguishes itself from all of these other legends, including the Sumerian. The Hebrew Bible says that there really is an original creator, God, from outside of time, space, in the beginning, created the heavens and the earth. Done. He's the creator. and only he can exist outside of time space. And these other beings that he created at some point went sideways. They decided, we don't want to follow your rule, your reign, your authority. We're going to do our own thing. And this created a war in the heavens from ancient times. It resulted in extreme destruction, which is referred to in Genesis 1:2, and the earth became void and without form. That's the first reference to an ancient destruction that happened to Lucifer's kingdom here on earth. God wiped it out. Actually, Michael did. The archangel Michael destroyed the civilization that was here on this planet. And Richard Hoagland, I read about his research about a planet that blew up, Astera. It's now where the asteroid belt is, and we see fragments of it. They're asteroids. But a chunk of that hit Earth, a chunk of it hit Mars, a chunk of it hit Saturn. Completely wiped out every trace of civilization of Lucifer's kingdom in this entire solar system. And it was void and without form. The Hebrew word tohu is referenced there in Genesis 1:2, and it refers to a destruction that happened right in the beginning. Then God recreated the earth into a habitable state. And that's what you see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 through chapter 2, verse 25. As for verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's potentially billions of years between verse 1 and verse 2, where angels lived in harmony and peace throughout the cosmos for millions, even billions of years before there was a rebellion. And the rebellion that Satan led took eons. I mean, maybe even millions of years he was spreading deception all throughout the cosmos. And in that time, he finally led this rebellion against God's throne, and he was defeated by the archangel Michael. So the next time you see him, he's in the Garden of Eden, and he's trying to deceive Adam and Eve. And are you saying something? Because I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Oh boy.
Oh, there it is.
Apparently, I was talking when I was on mute. Yes, I wanted to
sorry.
ask you about that thing regarding Archangel Michael that you actually said a couple minutes ago,
Okay.
saying that it was Archangel Michael who it was wiped out the earth. That kind of reminds me of something I heard a little debate going on between Michael Salla and Laura Eisenhower in a recent interview they did with each other, talking about the work of Ashayana Dean, who caused a little bit of a brouhaha with some of her claims. One claim in particular was that Archangel Michael wasn't really the good guy that he claimed he was. Goes against everything everybody's ever thought about the archangels. But you just said something about Archangel Michael being the one who wiped out humanity.
No. He wiped out Lucifer's ancient kingdom.
Okay.
Lucifer had a kingdom on earth that predates humanity. It's in Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28. And when he led his rebellion from earth into the sides of the north to the planet where God's throne is, Michael intervened and destroyed his kingdom and cast Satan back down to earth. And that's all talked about in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. So it was Michael that destroyed Satan's rebellion. He put an end to it.
Okay, sorry, playing with my thing there, headset.
Okay.
All right, at this point, I'm going to ask that the rest of this interview, people want to listen to it, please subscribe on Patreon. We'll go for maybe another 15 minutes or so, and cover a couple subjects here on the fly. Interesting subjects. I do encourage people to subscribe to Patreon. I lost all my Patreon subscribers the last few months when I wasn't able to do any shows. Love to get some people back, and I'm sure you all try to get shows on more often, folks.